Ryen Russillo, my buddy, podcast host at The Ringer. By the way, I don't think you and I have talked about that, and I know it's a very serious subject, but my takeaway on this stuff is I think I was too preachy as a talk show host in my 20s and 30s. I was too preachy. And I think once I had kids, I've realized I don't know squat. Life's become very gray. I don't have to agree with every decision you or I make, but you make it for your taxes and your life and your family. I mean, I have a family. You have your guys. So you tell me, what was your takeaway on what happened yesterday?
I wasn't even remotely surprised. I'm very aligned with you on, if you're going to be somebody who is going to knock everybody else for some kind of connection, then you better have all of your stuff buttoned up and that you're never, ever going to expose yourself to being a hypocrite later on. Like, if you want to be really preachy, then okay, go ahead, do it. But I guarantee I can find something that makes you really inconsistent with the stuff that you're saying publicly. So, I really like, it was one of those things in the beginning where it's like, wait a minute, so you're pro live golf, so that means ... And you're like, no, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. What I'm saying is that it seems to be that business trumps everything.
Yeah.
And it happened again. And to act like to act like this is some surprise, and then what? You're going to do your 10 minutes on it? You're going to say bad things are bad? Okay, cool. You win. Awesome monologue. I'm not even talking about you, oh, bad things are bad. All right, awesome. What's in the B block? So I don't really look at this thing. I wasn't remotely surprised that this is what happened at the end, because this is what always happens. And that's why when it happened in the beginning, I didn't really have some aggressive take about it because I felt like this was so predictable, and it's exactly what we all thought.
So you came out. It's interesting on the Ja Morant situation. We were talking this morning, and I said it's actually worse that his camp now said it's a toy gun. And I'm like, wait, time out. So now you're just joking about the situation. Like, now if I was a parent and I grounded my kid and they mocked me and laughed about it, I'd be more upset. But your takeaway is, I think, a valid one, that you think by and large fans get crazy on suspensions, and Ja Morant falls into that.
Yeah, we are punishment obsessed. I mean, there's some correlation, a thing that we just talked about, right? Like, how do you debate some of these awful things that happen and then go, yeah, that feels like 6 games. Ooh, that's a little nastier. Maybe it's 9. Because everybody's afraid to be like, okay, this bad thing happened. What's the right number of games for somebody to be suspended? And I always feel like there's a line of like how far you can be suspended where I'm like, okay, that seems high. So with Ja, as dumb as this stuff keeps happening, that's happening, like, if it's half the season, Colin, that's insane to me. But nobody would want to say like, well, I think 20 games is too long. And you're like, wait, so that means you think what Ja's been doing is good? No, I think everything he's done is impossibly stupid here. And there's probably more that we don't even know about. But the way this was teased by the NBA and Silver being like, hey, this time around, and then the way it gets talked about in our circles of like, could it be a season? Could it be a season? Like, are you kidding? But I think some of us that are on the other side of not having punishment handed out, like, none of us want to seem light on it to then seem like we're okay with the acts that led to the punishment in the first place.
Right. So I remember during the Boston-Miami series, I said, it just seems like, I remember my take was, it feels like Boston has way more good players, but Spo will win 2 games. So it's a 6-game series. Spo's going to just steal 2 wins. Well, it was probably 3. But then I started thinking as I watched them, have I overvalued Boston's talent and undervalued Miami? So let me ask you, for a guy that watches more basketball than anybody I know that doesn't work in the league, is Miami just more talented than any of us want to admit?
No. I know we have a really hard time when there are results, and you're like, all right, well, this happened, so that means that all this stuff happened. Okay, if you took Miami's roster and Boston's roster and handed it out in dispersal draft, like, you wouldn't all of a sudden be taking more Miami players than Boston players. And that really speaks to, one, how prepared Miami is. They're smarter than everybody. They're tougher than everybody. Butler is wired a certain way that you want him closing your games. But some weird stuff has happened along the way. Like, Caleb Martin scored more points in the Eastern Conference Finals than any undrafted player has ever scored in the finals or conference finals since the modern draft, going back to 1967. Miami had a negative point differential in the regular season. The last team to make it to the NBA Finals with that stat was, I think, the 1959 Minneapolis Lakers. All right. They have a negative point differential through the first three quarters of all of their quarters so far in the playoffs, but are like plus 90 in the fourth.
Yeah.
So what happens is the rules for what we do are like, wait, they keep beating everybody. That means that they're actually way more talented. Yeah, like clearly Caleb Martin has something to him at times. And then Gabe Vincent picks him up. Then Max Strus hits a million shots. We all like Bam. We like Jimmy. But they've lost like two rotation guys throughout this, and they're mixing and matching it, and they're still here where they're tied in the NBA Finals. So I like to look at it this way. It's okay to suggest that this is really special.
Yeah.
Okay? But it can't be both special and almost unprecedented in my NBA watching career.
Yeah.
If they pull this off, and even getting to this point, it can't be special, but also to be expected. Because if it were expected, then it wouldn't be special. And that's what this is right now. If they pull this off, Colin, I think it's the most unlikely title run of the 40 years that I've been watching the sport.
Yeah. The Frank Vogel got a job with the Suns. It didn't bother me because I think he's good with bigs, and they got to figure out DeAndre Ayton, and I think he'll probably be good for the room. He's not a confrontational guy. Something was wrong with the culture, and Monty and Ayton, and I like Monty, but it just wasn't working. What do you make of the people that go, oh, here's another retread, here's his fourth job? What do you make of that?
Coaching hires are a lot like relationships, right? Whatever you did or didn't have in the past, you're thinking about the next one. Like you always used to tell me about your dating life, and you were like, like she doesn't respect me. I need somebody who's going to respect me in the future. And I was like, well, look, some of your takes are spicy, and if you're going to bring this home, if you're going to bring the work home with the takes, anyways. But you're happy now, and everything's good.
That's
and I
right.
couldn't be happier for you as a friend. Extreme close up on the shot today, I'm noticing, by the way. Anyway, when you have a new coach who doesn't have experience before, it's almost like a lock. You're going to go back to the coach that has experience. And what we had in the 22 to 21 cycles, we had 7 head coaches, I believe, that were hired that had no previous head coaching experience. So the cool thing going back to the summer of 21 and a couple hires in 22 were, okay, who's the long-term assistant who's never gotten his shot? Who's the new young assistant that everybody thinks is awesome that we're going to give him his shot? And I think the counter to that, again, I don't think people understand how quickly these guys are fired. Taylor Jenkins has the 5th longest tenure in the NBA as a head coach, and he was hired 4 years ago. Okay, that's nuts. So all of these guys are getting fired no matter what anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I think what we're seeing, even if you want to go specific to like Quinn Snyder left Utah, there are a bunch of places that wanted him to be the head coach.
That's right.
Vogel should have never been fired. I'm happy Darvin Ham finally got his chance. But the idea that any of the Westbrook stuff was Vogel's fault, remember that old tale being told? Be like, oh yeah, now that Vogel's gone, he'll figure Westbrook out. No, so Vogel never should have been fired in the first place. And Nurse, even though it feels like it ran its course in Toronto, I'm telling you, the list is not very long of guys ahead of him that when other teams are talking about like looking at special things that teams do, well, that Nurse teams did in Toronto, and the way he would prep his team up for certain matchups, they were like, Nurse is like head of the class when it comes to that. So it can feel a little retready-ish, but really I think what we're doing is we're entering a new cycle of teams going, you know what, actually, let me just bring in somebody who has a lot of experience. And Nurse, I think the job itself, it's just hard to have this job a long time, even if you're doing a good job.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.